I apologize for the weird uploading schedule for today. It's mostly because we have some topics that I really wanted to go over here that both involve my Vancouver Canucks, and because the Canucks are playing at 4 PST and the Oilers are playing at 7 PST, we're making this video the first one of the day. Let's talk about Brandon Sutter, because on an earlier article on The Province, it was Ben Kuzma who writes about how a healthy UFA Brandon Sutter wants to stay in Vancouver, but how he is also drawing trade buzz. There's always going to be speculation and talk. I want to be here in Vancouver, and this is where I want to stay. Really, there are no secrets from me, Canucks pending UFA center Brandon Sutter says in the headline. This article was actually published a few days ago. It's back on February 28th, but because it was put into the yesterday issue of Spectre's Hockey, I was like, okay, that's actually really cool. Let's talk about that over here. So, this article by Ben Kuzma is going over Brandon Sutter, a guy whom a lot of Canucks fans have been... Oh boy, what do I even say for Brandon Sutter? He's been a guy who, when he is on, hey, he's actually pretty alright. But when he is not on, he is either injured, which, believe me, he's been injured a lot over the past few seasons when he was here in Vancouver, or he is just straight up not scoring points. There were some years, like for example 2016-17, where Brandon Sutter was legitimately an offensive threat, 34 points, 17 goals, 17 assists in a full season, but aside from that, Sutter was never really the most consistent guy in terms of production, so really what he brought were the intangibles. It was his charming personality in the locker room that was able to bond guys together. It was the penalty killing. It was the defensive play. It was the face-offs. It was all these things that made a hockey player valuable outside of his ability to score points that Brandon Sutter had. Which is why, back when he was a free agent to be, in 2016, the Vancouver Canucks re-signed him to a $4.375 AAV contract for the next 5 years. It was seen as an overpayment then, it's seen as pretty much an overpayment now because, you know, $4.375 million, that's not an insignificant amount. And for a guy that was, in some seasons, only putting up 6 points in the season that he played, or in this year's worth of play where he's out there getting like 2-goal games every other game, but he's only at 7 points in 27 games played. Another one of these guys in the bottom 6 who just cannot get important goals when the team needs them, like the Beagles and like the Roussells, also who are overpaid too. But this article goes over the Brandon Sutter thing because he is indeed expiring later this season, and as a guy who has been overpaid the past few years, and who has been a big part of this Vancouver Canucks squad not actually being able to sufficiently deal with their cap, the article says that he could be a roster rental solution for the Edmonton Oilers in pursuit of a playoff position and the opportunity to be a postseason force in the North Division. Now, the article does go over a very deep dive into this little idea here, but I wanted to interject with my own opinions as well, because when I think about Brandon Sutter and a potential trade, my first immediate instinct is the Vancouver Canucks have been trying, or at least it's been noted in the media that they've been trying to trade this guy for the better part of the past few years. It's never worked. But the difference is, this year, he actually is expiring, so it's not like there's a second or a third year of that 4.3-something AAV that any potential trade team is going to have to deal with if they acquire a Sutter, which makes, all of a sudden, the trade talks now a lot more interesting, because Benning said it a few years ago, back in last season's offseason, and the one before that. We have players that other teams want. So when it comes to managing their cap, it should be easy because they have players that they could move to free up cap space, and Brandon Sutter was always seen as one of those options. They just could never actually get the deal done, which is why he is still on the team today, especially as a guy who is saying that, you know, he wants to be here, he loves playing here, which I don't really think he's lying about. I think he's definitely being genuine. He's been here the past few years, and Vancouver's a cool place to play in. Plus, Brandon Sutter's just that kind of a cool guy that I wouldn't really expect him to be super antsy or super anxious or super antagonistic of whatever it is he is given. He's just a cool guy, Brandon Sutter is. But at the end of the day, he's an overpaid asset, which is why this idea to the Edmonton Oilers is a very interesting one. This is why there could be a bit of a Sutter buzz in the Alberta capital, because with 11 victories in their last 14 outings, the Oilers have overcome a slow start, but what was eventually going to be a 3 straight series loss to the Maple Leafs snapped a 5-game win streak, and a lot of that was because of their occasional defensive deficiencies. The Oilers could see the 32-year-old center Brandon Sutter as a potential replacement for the struggling Kyle Turris in a third-line alignment with Tyler Ennis and Josh Archibald to be responsible and good in transition. That would complement the top 2 lines, centered by McDavid and Draisaitl, and what was at the time an 8th-ranked power play. The article then talks about Kyle Turris and how the guy has been sitting out, how he hasn't really been playing, and how he hasn't really been all too great, which is kind of surprising to me because Kyle Turris, I always kind of have that reputation in my head of Turris being that just really strong top 2 center with the Ottawa Senators, but we all kind of know that things took a turn for the worse when he went over to Nashville. But now the Oilers are in a position where you could debate they might need that defense. We saw how they played against the Toronto Maple Leafs the other night, 6 goals against, and then you saw how they played against the Toronto Maple Leafs the night before, 4 goals against, and then 3 goals against, all while not scoring any goals. I will say though, Brandon Sutter might not be the guy that you acquire because you want him to get points out there, but hey, when you have a team with McDavid, Draisaitl, Yamamoto, the Nuge, and all them, those are the guys that you want to go out there and score points, and you expect them to score a heck of a lot of points. So, what you really want to tighten down on is the other parts of the game, the defensive side of things. The defensive zone draws, the penalty killing, the board battles, those things are the things that you probably want to improve if you already have your offense and McDavid and Draisaitl already established and set in stone. And hey, you know, Brandon Sutter could be that guy if you want to go after a player who is good on the penalty kill and in his own zone and all that stuff. That's what the article says over here, and it's a point that I very much agree with in theory. And you know, I'm not really going to try to go out there and expect some crazy return for Brandon Sutter. Would not be surprised if this guy gets something as little as a 7th round pick or whatever, because at the end of the day, we know that in the past, guys who are good, quote-unquote, don't always get draft picks in return. For example, Thomas Vanek, that guy didn't get any draft picks. Only UC Jokinen and Tyler Mott came back. And it was because teams didn't really feel super confident in building a market around a guy like Thomas Vanek because he was known for disappearing in the playoffs. He was known for being one-dimensional. So was there really a good enough incentive to go out there and give a 2nd or a 3rd for Thomas Vanek, even when guys like Rick Nash went out there for 1st-round picks in that year? But for Brandon Sutter, honestly, I'll say it right here. The guy wasn't terrible in the postseason last year. 6 points in 17 games played, but for some reason, he actually came alive. Like, what he was actually producing, he was doing so in a very meaningful way, and honestly, he became a really clutch player in the postseason, especially against St. Louis in the previous playoffs. So when it comes to the tangibles, I guess, these things amplify when you're in the postseason. So I think it gives a lot more value to teams that are out there potentially looking for a guy like this. And if Edmonton is that, then hey, maybe you could squeeze out a pick or 2, maybe a prospect or whatever. The article goes over Kuzma's own idea of returns and all that, so I'll leave you the link in the description to go ahead and read that for yourself. But for Brandon Sutter, I mean, because he's a cool guy, I would not be surprised if the Vancouver Canucks kept him around and maybe even tried to re-sign him, hopefully for something a lot cheaper than $4.375. But I think it was a point made on the Vancast, I'm pretty sure. It was either the Vancast or somebody else on Twitter who said this, but if you're thinking about impact and you're thinking about the past, I don't know if the Canucks actually would want to do it just based off of what the fans' reaction would be because of how terrible the Sutter contract was for the past 5 years and how limiting it's been. We already know the reputation he has amongst this fan base, so what more if they decide to bring him back, even if it's for a cheaper deal? So, I don't really know. I could see all 3 scenarios. Either A, you trade him away because he's got good intangibles for a playoff team. B, you re-sign him because of course the Canucks like those intangibles. Or C, they just let him walk. But at the end of the day, letting a free asset walk probably isn't the best asset management now, isn't it? Tanev, Toffoli, Markstrom, Stetcher, Levo, Hamhuis, Verbata, maybe Pearson, who knows? Talk to me in the comments what you thought about this Brandon Sutter idea. Of course, Edmonton is just one out of the many teams in the NHL that might be able to make the playoffs and might be interested in the market for this kind of guy. So let me know in the comments what you thought. I hope you enjoyed this video. And link in the description to the article as well. And bye.